stop before the question and answer session. And also just to let you know that the press has been invited, so just to be aware of that as well. The format of the meeting will be that the speakers are going to speak for, I think, 12 minutes each. Is that right, Barney? Yes. And then we'll open it up to discussion. And then speakers will come back at the end just for final comments or based on questions. So as we go through the process, I mean, if you want to put questions, comments in the chat, please do so. Other than that, we are going to begin. And I would just like to welcome our first speaker today, Sipho Sibanda, who is a Zimbabwean socialist and human rights activist living in Belfast. And she has played a pivotal role in organising last year's Black Lives Matter demonstration in Belfast before it was repressed by the PSNI. She is active with United Against Racism in the city. So welcome, Sipho. Thanks for speaking.
Thank you, Nuala, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. I got thinking when I got invited to speak at this conference what an alternative island would mean for me, Sibanda. This question still rings in my mind, and I'm not sure if I've got an answer for it. I'll tell you what the current one looks like at the minute. See, your island might be different from mine. Your alternative island might be different from mine, and your current island might be different from mine. I'll focus on a small bit so that I don't bore you or overwhelm you or overwhelm anybody anyway. I will talk about the state of housing that is provided to people that come to our island to seek protection. I believe the state of our housing needs a policy change. Why is it that our government puts a lot of money into private landlords and yet fail to hold them accountable to their contracts? Millions are paid every year to the likes of mayors and the companies that run direct provision down in the south. The tree is just rotten. Why is it that we're expecting the fruits to be any better? We get surprised by the rotten fruits that is produced by this tree, and yet we keep watering the tree and fertilizing it. Yet we realize that it's a rotten tree. What am I saying? I'm saying we need a system overhaul. The current system is just not right. It is racist. It is a racist system, and it's designed to make people's lives miserable at all angles. When a person presents themselves to authorities as seeking refuge, they are homeless. The state recognizes this, which is why they're given accommodation that is meant to be suitable. And this is a human right, accommodation being given to somebody. Homelessness is a human right issue, which is why it is addressed or supposed to be addressed at the point of need. Yet in the Republic, we have direct provision, a system that piles grown men from different countries into a room, worse than a school dormitory, very close probably to a prison cell. Then the same system tells these adults, time to go and eat, time to sleep. I will decide for you what you'll eat. In the same system, you are kept for years. You are de-skilled. Until recently, there was a systematic change in the South that allowed asylum seekers to work, of course. Well, it still has its own faults, but I'm not going to focus on that for today. I'll leave it to another day. Up here in the North, people get placed in accommodation that is moldy. We've seen roofs collapse as people sit in these so-called homes. Properties that are not even close to good standards. Residents are not given the right to the right routes to complain whenever they've got something to complain about the accommodation that they're given. And when they do complain, when they find a way to complain, they are abused and threatened with the Home Office. As if that's not enough. When somebody's claim and appeal is rejected, they lose their accommodation. So the same government that recognized you, that you were homeless at some stage, the same government policy that kept you in poor standard accommodation and denied you the right to work, forced you to live on a mere £5 a day and forced you to know all the food banks. This same government that put up so many barriers to a lot of things that drove you to taking antidepressants just to get through the day, well, it turns around and kicks you out and makes you homeless again. Suddenly, you have no human right at that stage. You are not allowed to access homelessness hostels at that stage, because if a homeless hostel allows you into their hostel, their funding gets taken away. They lose their funding completely. 7 to 12 years later, people are in waiting. In this prison that has no walls, family members die, loved ones die, people around you progress in life. Yours is just still, nothing changing. You are capable, more than capable, but it means nothing. Just go on like a little boy and accept the charity that you're given. Go to your volunteer job, if you still have one. Keep counting the days as they turn into years. I have seen grown men and women being broken down by this system. I have witnessed people being beyond repair, if we can call people repairable. People that have some vision when it all started. They had dreams. They had families. I've seen it all go down the drain because of this island that we live in right now. An island discriminates me because I look and I sound different. An island that will never fully accept me as belonging to it because of the color of my skin. One that polices me extremely because of the color of my skin. One that feels threatened by me, by me being a Black person. So again, I ask, what will this alternative island bring to someone like me? I sure hope that it brings a change that will consider people that flee and make this island their home. I pray that it is accommodating to the ethnic minority people and Black people like me. Thank you. Thank you, Nuala.
Thank you so much, Sipho, for that very powerful and emotive introduction, and really asking that question of what does an alternative Ireland bring, you know, to you as a person and other people who've experienced such discrimination and horrible conditions here in Ireland. But thank you for that. It's really thought-provoking. I'm going to move on now and hear from Memet Uludağ, who is a trade unionist who helped to lead the 1918 Irish Life Strike with Unite. He is active with Extinction Rebellion and Lechela, the new Anti-Fascist Alliance, and he is also the national chair of United Against Racism. So, Memet, handing over to you now.
Thank you, Nuala, and greetings to everyone from Dublin. Great to have so many people here today. I'd like to start with something Sipho started with in terms of the reality of the current divided Ireland being somewhat different in terms of her. She used herself as an example, or the people of color or asylum seekers versus others maybe. And I think there is some element of truth and significant truth in that. As we have seen over the past few months in the north and south, especially in terms of Black Lives Matter and asylum seekers and people of color. But I hope that this conference is also making a firm commitment and a firm assessment that the vision for a future United Ireland is in fact not different, and we have common and shared aspirations and common visions for that united Ireland, and there is no difference, in our hopes and in our struggles for that united Ireland. So I'm the national organizer of United Against Racism, and I'm glad and delighted to be here today with you. And I hope throughout this conference, if you don't me repeating a couple of times, that please join United Against Racism. We have branches in the north and south, and bring the struggle of fight against racism wherever you are to a new level. We need the stronger and louder fight against racism in every which way of it. I think it's very important that that we have this session in this conference today, and it is a timely conversation to have, really, given the situation we live in today, north and south. It's also very important to recognize the developments in the north and the recent events in the south, and I will mention some of these recent racist events and recent events that has become an eye-opener for many of us in terms of the rise of the far right and the police in the north and south, how they deal with people of color. In the south, they kill them, it seems, and I will talk about that briefly as well. It is also important to congratulate the organizers of this conference and having a session on fighting the racism north and south, and indeed having 3 speakers from ethnic minority and people from migrant backgrounds and people of color as the speakers. And I think it's very important to recognize that we are part of this island. We are part of the north and south, but also all Ireland. And we belong to this island of Ireland, and everything that happens on this island of Ireland affects us in similar and in sometimes different ways. But we are part of the struggle. It's very important that we talk about all of these things. When I came to Belfast 2 years ago, along with others, to join the protest against the far right, in those days it was Britain First, I think, that organized, and United Against Racism and others had organized counter mobilizations. It was very clear to me that people of living in the north and south were indeed actually united against racism, united against far right, and united for a different Ireland. Racism divides communities in the north and south in different and similar ways, but anti-racism had indeed united us already long before the possibility of a united Ireland. So we were united in our struggle against racism and far right. I think that is a great, hopeful place to start with, I think. But a united Ireland isn't going to be just about geography or which power is going to run the state. It's run the land. It's going to be more importantly about what the future of this island is going to be going to look like, and how we are going to shape this future, and who's going to shape this future. It's how is this going to be an island that confronts and fights racism everywhere on this land? It's not just going to be racism on the streets, but it's going to also be racism, institutional racism, the police racism that we have experienced during the Black Lives protests, etc., in the north and in the south indeed as well. It is going to be a debate about how the migrant workers in this island are going to be protected. How are the refugees and asylum seekers going to be welcomed to this island, to this land? How are minorities such as travelers be able to live their lives without constant systematic discrimination and a very systematic racism directed at them all the time? How is this island going to smash the threat of rising far right and all the dangers that comes with it? It is not going to be just a debate, in my view, just on economic issues, but also how the society is going to be shaped. I think it's going to be a debate about social economic rights of the ordinary working class people, including migrants, minorities, people of color, asylum seekers, and refugees, without one person left behind. We have 2 right-wing and racist states. Let's be clear about that. Our vision should be a united Ireland that is not the sum of these 2 states in their current form or shape of their reactionary policies and their racist policies and structures. It is a totally different vision than that. It should be a vision uniting, I think, Catholics and Protestant working classes, as well as migrants, minorities, It should be a vision that unites black and white in the fight for a different future, for a different island, for everyone included. Racism is a poison that divides communities, workers, and serves
Yes, absolutely.
No purpose to for our collective future. I had written a while ago an article debating whether the Irish state is racist, etc. And I've looked at various aspects of the state, focusing on institutional racism. And the conclusions I had come to were equally valid in my mind, whether it's the state in the north or whether it's the state in the south. So we are facing sort of similar problems wherever we are. It is a racist state. There are racist states. And all of the issues we are facing in the south are equally, if not worse, in some ways, faced by people in the north as well. I think we need to continue our fight against racism in the north and south in ways that are specific to these geographies. But also, I think we need to unite our struggle across all of this island and be part of an all-Ireland fight against racism on Ireland. I mean, major issues surfaced during COVID-19 pandemic, for example, and people of color have been affected in some ways quite worse than average. That doesn't mean ordinary people haven't been affected, but we have seen frontline workers, people of color, asylum seekers, migrant workers in meat factories, and that is another area where we have to look at, for example, how crises, on this divided island are affecting migrants on both sides of the border. And Sipho mentioned asylum seekers and refugees. One thing that needs to be very well understood by people who may not know that the so-called free travel, for example, between the two jurisdictions does not exist for asylum seekers and indeed for migrants. There are regular border checks and border controls and all of those things, literally stopping people and checking and profiling people based on their color and how they look like. So the fight has to continue basically in that part of the fight for a united, different alternative island. But there are a few other specifics as well I like to conclude with what needs to be done really part of this fight. I think the fight against racism is an important task for all progressive individuals and organizations in our communities and in our workplaces. Racism must be called out and denounced. Where necessary, it has to be mobilized against. That's very important. We can't just drop the ball on that. But we also need to take the threat of the far right. Build mass. Did you hear me? My last sentence. Yeah, we need to take the far right serious, the threat of it, and build anti-fascist mass mobilizations and united fronts, basically. We need to also drive a wedge between ordinary working class people and the far right, and indeed sometimes racist ideas and the far right, because the far right is marginal, it's small, and it has to stay that way, if not gotten rid of altogether. So it is important for us to understand the dynamics between the two struggles and the relationship between these struggles, but a wedge has to be driven between ordinary people and indeed racists and the far right, because they have specific strategies that need to be applied. But also the fight against racism has to be part of all other progressive struggles for economic and social rights, for all good things that ordinary decent people require as their rights of being citizens of this united island. And it is the fight for interest of the majority of the decent people, ordinary decent people, rather than a tiny minority. 20 years ago, it was that too many asylum seekers came to the north and south, and they were sucking the social welfare dry. That's what we were told, as if there was any social welfare that was decent enough. So the social welfare was the issue. 10 years ago, when the big economic crises hit the north and south, equally or differently, but nonetheless, it hit the ordinary working classes like a ton of bricks. It was then too many migrants were here and they were taking our jobs. It was the migrants that were part of the problem. Or the refugees were swamping this island coming from the Middle East or Africa. Today, it seems we are talking about a massive housing crisis, and it is the housing that needs to be provided to the Irish people first. And interesting enough, in the north and south, there is no provision of affordable public housing to ordinary working class Irish people. It's not as if there is a stock of houses and they are giving to asylum seekers, refugees, or migrant workers. Quite country, but housing has become a talking topic for far-right ideas, hiding behind it and injecting racism and far-right ideas behind that. So in future, as we saw with the refugees of the war and troubles in parts of the world, we are facing a serious threat of the climate change and ecological crises that will, as it's not a surprise to anyone, that will create massive waves of future refugees, climate refugees, and it will become another probably opportunity for racists and the far right to utilize in the projects and campaigns. I think we need to recognize the changing dynamics of racism from the top, and the topic, it might be the topic of the day, but the ways and the methods of the racists continue to wanting to divide us, and we need to continue to reject punching downwards, and we need to punch upwards in this divided Ireland, but also as a vision of a united alternative Ireland that punches upwards, not downwards. And I think finally, I like to say, we need to get organized. I think it's very important to be organized, be part of organizations and structures to bring the fight to a new level, and be part of a network of a fight against racism, and indeed united fronts against the threat of the far right. On that basis, I'm sharing the online joiner forum for United Against Racism, and I hope many more people will join, and we will not only fight for great many things for great masses of people, but we also part of this bring the voice of anti-racism to all of these struggles and make it a central piece of a future Ireland that is united, that is not sectarian, and that welcomes refugees and migrants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Memet, for that speech there. Again, really powerful, really informative, and just showing this all the many obstacles and dynamics that are at play here as we move towards an alternative Ireland that is socialist and that is inclusive of everybody that lives here. And I totally agree with your words. We are part of this Ireland and we belong. Yes, every single person here belongs. There was a comment made before we came live that when you follow Memet, there's nothing left to say because he's already said it all. Well, Memet said a lot, but he hasn't said everything and not covered all the angles. Our last speaker, I'm really delighted to welcome, is Senator Eileen Flynn, who has made her name as a powerful voice for human rights and equality across Ireland and a voice of Irish travellers. In 2020, she became the first traveller woman to be elected to the Houses of the Oireachtas. So, Eileen, I'd really like to welcome you here today and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, and I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me here today. Just to start off, you know, Zoom is a bit boring, and it's always like you're speaking to yourself. You don't have that energy in the room, and I've just seen in the chats that, you know, you've got one or two gobshites on here as well in the chat and stuff, and it's people like, you know, you're not even safe in your own home giving a presentation or giving a talk. And it's because of people like them that we, as Memet has already said, we all need to stick together and get organised. And I wouldn't even say fight back, but keep on fighting for what we want to achieve as a society of people from ethnic minority groups and from working class areas, and as socialists as well. So I just want to start off by saying that Bernadette, I don't know what I'm going to say, it's just going to come out because I don't write speeches. Bernadette Devlin speaks about, you know, we're born into a world, an unjust world, but we're not meant to grow up in an unjust world. And unfortunately, I've grown up in an unjust world, just like many other people from ethnic minority groups, people of colour and Black people. 21 years ago, direct provision was set up, and then it became a profit. And now we have the government waiting for at least another 3-4 years to end direct provision. Why do we have to wait that many years? Have having people suffered enough already? Could we not just end it, like end it tomorrow, end it today? Where there's a will, there's a way. And around government policies, some of these policies are aimed to be racist, aimed to oppress people and to keep people down. And as a traveller woman, one piece of legislation and an act that really stands out to me, and it should be ripped up and it should never be even found down line again, is the 1963 the itinerant report. And that report refers, like, that report has really set the tone of how travellers are treated today in Irish society. Then we have, just to name a few of them, then we have the Trespassing Act that was brought in 2000, in 2000, and that act stopped travellers from being nomadic people, stopped us from travelling in the south. And yet now in the north, they're looking at having the one act, the Trespassing Act, to stop travellers from travelling in the north as well. So there's no better part of Ireland. It's equally as bad if you're from an ethnic minority group, or if you're a person of colour, or a person living in direct provision. And you know, it really, really disheartens me as a traveller woman, but now as somebody that works in the House of the Oireachtas and trying to represent people who's on the margins of society, that the political will is still not there for the change, to make life better. Like, we're not asking for special treatment. All we're asking for is to be treated as human beings and to be treated equally in society. And just to say, you know, it's very worrying to see the little, I wouldn't even give them any credit, but to see the far right movement being a little bit more proactive and getting funding and stuff from different countries and etc. But like, that's our flag. As Memet has already said, that's every one of our flags. What makes you Irish? You know, look after our own. Who is Ireland's own? And that's something that I speak about very, very often, because believe me and you, the homeless person on the street who's a drug addict is not Ireland's own. A traveller person who's homeless is not Ireland's own. A refugee person is not Ireland's own. And neither is a black person Ireland's own. So ask yourself that question. You know, I have members of my family, my extended family, that this state is killing people, just turning to drugs, turning to alcohol. I'm seeing it more evident every single day of my life, where people have no other option and feel so low in the world and just not having a voice. You know, if we look at the suicide rate within the traveller community, every 11 deaths in my community is caused by suicide. Traveller men are 7 times more likely to die by suicide than men from the general population. Traveller women 6 times more likely to die by suicide than women from the general population. Travellers are 13% more likely to be homeless than people from the general population. It's 2021. Why is this still the reality for travellers in Ireland today? Why isn't there political will there? And together, I genuinely believe that we can change it and we can make Ireland a better place for people from working class areas and people from ethnic minority groups, because we're the groups that's been left behind. We're the groups that's living in shit accommodation. We're the groups that have to see people within our communities die due to policy, due to state discrimination, where we have white men in suits that's putting policies together for us, and we don't have a voice at any level. And sometimes they pretend they want to hear our voice, and they try to get us around tables, the positive discrimination, the tokenism, but our voices are never heard. And I hope, and an all Ireland for me means that it's a fair Ireland, where everybody plays a fair part in society, and where people from ethnic minority groups get to have our own say. You know, there's so many people in my community that, you know, what does it mean today to be a traveller? You can't travel in Ireland. you know, and then you take some of your culture, like even around, if I even name the horse associations, you know, now they're trying to stop traveller people and people who are genuinely interested in horses, not to have horses, not being allowed to have part of our culture, you know. And it's very, very disheartening. And I can't say that there's better policies in the north and then there's some good policies in the south, because if I'm looking at equality, it's equally as bad, and people just get treated like shit. And you know, the will is not there. I've seen it. I've participated in the House of their Oireachtas. The political will is not there to have a more fair Ireland for everybody, because it's not just in Ireland. If the far right like it or not, and actually I don't feel 100% threatened by them, because I know the majority of Irish people are good living people, and we've been through discrimination. No Irish, no dogs, no blacks, and we all know those signs. So I do believe that I don't feel threatened by the far right. I believe they're moving right now, but right now it's a shame that they're using the All Ireland flag for further discrimination and the racism, and bringing people with them, trying to bring people with them. But if we even look at the people that they're bringing with them, they're vulnerable people. They're people that's looking for answers and looking to belong in a group or in an organisation, and they're the people that they're getting. Because I've got many friends that I went to school with in Ballyfarmers that I know are good people, and they're part of the far right movement. They're working class people and part of the far right movement. That doesn't make them bad people. That just, you know, people. And I believe that the government, the policies, people not having their say in Ireland is creating the rise of the far right. And I don't know, it's just, you know, even doing this talk today, you're preaching to the choir. You're preaching to, it's like a priest going to say mass on a Sunday. The people who are there are religious people. And it's the same way doing this talk today. People who are here are people who are not racist and who try their very best to stop racism from happening, you know. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm sick of fighting against. And I think now it's about fighting for, and it's fighting for equality and for human rights. And there's some policies and legislation that we need to get, as Memet has said, that we need to get active around, and we need to repeal. We need to repeal the trespass legislation for the traveller community. We need to end direct provision now. Not in 2 years, not in 3 years. There's people dying in direct provision. There's people really sick in direct provision. There's young children being reared in shitholes, excuse me language, and having no basic human rights. And adults, as being said, adults being told when they have to go to bed, when they can get up, when they can get something to eat. That's no way of living. We need to end direct provision now, not in 2 or 3 years down the line. So again, I'd like to thank you all for having me here today, and I am very emotional. I don't know if it's the hormones or what. It's just that it gets upon you that, you know, I've been doing activism for the last 10 years, and nothing has changed except things has got worse for people in Ireland, from ethnic minority groups and for black people, traveller people, and this bullshit around looking after your own. We can't look after white Irish people who was born and reared here when it comes to the homeless crisis. And we can't look after traveller people. We can't look after black people. And we are all equally Ireland's own. Whoever lives here belongs here. And that's why I want to end it with today. And I do believe that after the pandemic, I hope that we can get active, as Memet has said, and be on the streets, and hopefully we'll have a more equal Ireland. And what it takes is the political will. It's the political will. We have very, very little power, but one thing we do have, and we are very strong around, is our voice, is numbers on the streets. And I believe that we can make a change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Again, another really, really powerful speech. And I know you said you're kind of like talking to the converted, but actually, for me, even listening to the speeches today and the power and the emotion and that lived experience, that it is so essential for people to hear. And even, you know, when people are ideologically in favor of something, they're going out, the lived voice experience. So thanks to all three of you for sharing that with us. And we're going to open